Okay, hello, welcome to our grade subscribers. I hope wherever you're watching, you're safe. I'm back here at home in New Zealand. We seem to be doing really well with the battle against the virus. So I hope wherever you are that your battle against the virus is also going well. If this is the first time you're watching, again, my name is Greg. I've been an English teacher for the last 15 years or so. Most of that time I spent in South Korea, where I worked at a university for a lot of that time. I taught a lot of academic English. During my time in South Korea. So I think maybe we might have missed the start there. So just, if I've only just come up again, I'll start again. Welcome, my name is Greg. I've been an English teacher for the last 15 years. I've been back at home here in New Zealand for the last 2 years, where I've done a lot of work for the Grade site. So today's webinar is for our Grade subscribers. What we're going to be doing today is something different. It's the first time that we have done a webinar, especially for speaking. So we're going to look at part 1 of the speaking test. So very soon, I'm going to go to the virtual speaking test examination room. We're going to have Tom. He's going to be our examiner for today. He's going to ask me a series of questions. Now, these are questions which you might get in part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. These are questions which are also taken from the Grade site. I'm going to imagine I'm taking the test and I'm going to give a full answer. So maybe that part of the test will take about 5 minutes. You'll be able to see how I would answer those questions. Then, after the virtual speaking test, I'm going to go through and provide some commentary about the answers I provided and just give you some insight and some understanding about the speaking test. So I think very shortly, you'll see me switch over into our imaginary speaking test room. And here is Tom.
Hi. All right, shall we begin?
Yes, I'm a bit nervous, but I'm ready.
All right. Hello, my name is Tom. Could you please tell me your full name?
My given name is Alan, my middle name is Gregory, and my family name is Parkinson.
What should I call you?
Please call me Greg.
Could you tell me where you come from?
Sure. I'm from New Zealand. I was born in New Zealand's 4th largest city, Hamilton, and this is still where I live.
Let's talk about what you do. Do you work or do you study?
So actually, I do both. At the moment, I work for Grade part-time, and there are a number of different things I do for this website. At the moment, I'm running a series of webinars. I'm on to about webinar 29. These webinars are to help students prepare for the IELTS test, which is a major test which people that want to immigrate or go study overseas need to take. It's a standardized English test, and it's recognized by a number of different governments throughout the world. So on top of these webinars, I also create video content, which is uploaded to the site. Again, this video content is to help with the preparation for the test. Also, users of this internet site, often they have practice essays, and sometimes they send them through for a human to check, and that human is me. So I did mention that I study. I'm actually a full-time graduate student. At the moment, I'm on a 1-year intensive graduate diploma in primary school teaching. So primary school teaching is known as elementary school in many countries in the world. In New Zealand, it means students age 5 through to about age 12. I'm actually studying at Waikato University, which is quite famous because our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, that's her alma mater. So that's me. I work and study.
Great. Why did you choose that job, and do you enjoy it?
So why am I working for Grade? Well, I've been an English teacher for 15 years, and a couple of years ago, I met the owner of the website at a presentation here in Hamilton, and I thought the presentation was very interesting, and I became interested in online learning. So yeah, that's definitely the main reasons why I chose to work for Grade. I definitely enjoy it. It's a new experience for me. Online learning has become very popular these days. It's been a chance for me to learn new things, such as I spoke about before, like making webinars, making video content. And more importantly, or above all of these things, I get to interact with people from all over the world. I think that's really exciting when I do webinars. I know that there's people watching in India, Pakistan, all of these different countries, and I can sort of reach out to them via the internet. So it's a really nice experience.
Great. Let's now talk about your hometown. Where is your hometown?
My hometown is in the north of New Zealand's North Island. It's around 125 kilometres south of Auckland, which is New Zealand's largest city. It's 37 degrees south of the equator, which is a coincidence because my wife is from Seoul, which is 37 degrees north of the equator. Interesting fact, the antipode of Hamilton is Valencia in Spain, but Hamilton's climate isn't as hot.
Okay. What is the oldest place in your hometown?
I'm not really sure exactly what is exactly the oldest place, but a few places come to mind. So first, Victoria Bridge. This was the first bridge built in Hamilton. I think it was built in the 1880s, but it's still in use today. It's actually quite close to where I live. On the other side of Victoria Bridge, across the Waikato River, is a building known simply as the Bank. Originally it was a bank, but now it's a restaurant. So that was built around the same time. And I live in a suburb called Hamilton East, which is the oldest suburb in Hamilton. So it's on the other side of Victoria Bridge from the Bank. So a lot of the homes around here are well over 100 years old wooden colonial style architecture. So New Zealand is a relatively new country. While the places that I mentioned might not be considered old in many countries, they are in New Zealand terms.
Great. And that brings us to the end of part 1.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed watching my speaking test. I wasn't lying when I said I was a little bit nervous. I think everybody is going to be nervous when they do their speaking test, even this one being an imaginary speaking test. So the first tip I'd like to give you is hopefully you can see throughout the speaking test that I was smiling, right? So I'll just share the screen and I'll go through some commentary and talk about what I did on the test. So I'm just going to share the screen for you. Whoops. Okay. So at this point, I'd just like to go through and talk about each point, each question. So again, throughout the test, hopefully you can see me smiling. That's a tactic that I think can help anyone in any speaking test, especially the IELTS test. When you smile, you tend to have better pronunciation, better intonation especially. And it's just a tactic which I think is going to put you in a better mood in the test. I always feel a little bit nervous when I do these webinars because I know so many people are watching, whether it's live or on replays. So I think smiling is something which is definitely helpful. It helped me today. Hopefully my performance wasn't too bad. Let's have a look at the answers. So sometimes I'm going to give you my full answer. Perhaps I may have strayed from what I had prepared a little bit, but the main thing I want to talk about is how I expanded my answers. That's really the name of the game. If we look at the band descriptors, it talks about, expanding upon building your answers. So I was asked a very simple question. Could I please give my full name? So what I tried to do here is, rather than just say my full name is Alan Gregory Parkinson, that is actually my full name. I just go by Greg, even though it's my middle name. But I could have just said my full name is Alan Gregory Parkinson, but I took the opportunity to present some different vocabulary to the examiner. So I've used 3 different types of names, or words for 3 different types of names. I started with my given name, which is Alan. Another word for given name is first name, but I wanted to use the expression given name. Then I said my middle name is Gregory. And finally, my family name is Parkinson. I could have also said my surname, but again, I've taken that opportunity to present or demonstrate more vocabulary to the examiner. So even a very simple question like, what is your name? You can still introduce more vocabulary. Then I was just asked what I like to be called. And there I give my nickname or my shortened name, which is Greg. So not really too much else I could have said. Perhaps I could have said, well, everybody calls me Greg, but that's not every question requires a long answer. So I was asked where I come from. Now, I could have just said New Zealand, right? But this is a speaking test. And it's just like in writing task 1 and writing task 2. You want to demonstrate your command or your proficiency of English. To do that, you just really need to expand your answers. So I paraphrased. Instead of using come from, I said I am from. So I've tried to use different terms. So I said I'm from New Zealand. And then I started talking about where I was born, because sometimes where we're born and where we're from can be slightly different according to the individual. But I made a point of saying I was born in New Zealand. Then I started to add in some more details. So I said I was from the 4th largest city, Hamilton. So even when I start talking about largest, then I'm demonstrating the use of superlatives, as in biggest, fastest. Those are superlatives. And I also mentioned it's where I still live. So a very simple question like, where are you from? What is your name? Always try to add in a bit more detail. Just demonstrate your English ability. It's your only chance that you have. You're not going to take the speaking test again on the same day. So the onus or the responsibility is on you, in this case on me, to really demonstrate to the examiner. The examiner's given you that opportunity. Take it and just really show what you can do. So here I just have some bullet points. Now the reason I've made these bullet points is, well, I wanted to actually have a speaking test. I didn't want to try and read out a script. There's no way you can prepare scripts for the IELTS. Obviously, I knew which questions Tom was going to ask me because we had to plan for this webinar. But so that I can analyze what I talked about, I've made some bullet points. Hopefully, these are easy for you to follow at home. So I was asked about whether I work or study, which is quite a common question that you might get on part 1. So primarily I'm a student, that's what I do full-time, but obviously I work for grade part-time. So again, I'm taking that opportunity and I'm just going to talk about both. Now, a lot of people who study will work. A lot of people who work, they might just study, even if it's something that you study in your spare time. So surely most of you who are watching this, well, you're all studying for the IELTS test, and I assume that most of you work as well. So if you were asked this question, I think it would be a good opportunity for you to talk about both of these things. So what I did is I like to follow this rule that I like to talk about 3 different things. So when I spoke about my work, there are 3 different things that I wanted to talk about. The reason I like to just talk about things in 3s is because it's a nice way to expand my answer, but it kind of keeps it easy to remember. So I mentioned I work at grade, and then I said there are a number of different things that I do, right? So I first spoke about the webinars, which obviously you're familiar with and you're watching right now. Then what I did is I used some cohesive devices. These, much like in your writing, on the band descriptors, it talks about connectives. So then I said next. I think from memory I said next, right? So I talked about the video content that I had created. And it's very similar to the writing. Then I just add in a bit more detail. The detail I added in for webinars and the video content was that it's to help students prepare for the IELTS test. I even added in some more detail about the IELTS test. I said that it's a test that a lot of people take in order to immigrate or study overseas. Then finally, see, this comes naturally to me, finally, that's another connective or another cohesive device. I talked about checking essays, right? So some students use the site, they want a human to check it. And I actually started using a bit more body language at that point from memory. I pointed to myself, I said, that's me. And as I got into the test, I noticed my body language started coming out a bit more as well. So that can often be the case at the start, you're a bit stiff, but as you build into the test, the time starts going faster and you start speaking a bit more naturally. Then I went on to the second part of my answer where I said I was a full-time student. Now, again, I have prepared for this speaking test that I've shown you today, but I think the chances of you being asked about your work or study, you might not be asked about these in part one, but there's a good chance that you could be. So rather than try to memorize any scripts, how about you do the same thing as me? Just make 3 bullet points. If somebody asked you about your study, what would you say? So for me, I told them what kind of study I did. And I mentioned that it's full-time, that it's a 1-year course. I could have even given more detail about the 1-year course. But anyway, then I moved on to my kind of favorite fact, which I'm quite proud of, that the country's Prime Minister is a graduate from Waikato University. I used a term which maybe you might not have heard before. It's actually a Latin term. It's called alma mater or alma mater or alma mater. There are different ways of pronouncing it. So alma mater just means where you went to school, right? So that means Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, she went to Waikato University. So that expression, alma mater, A-L-M-A, new word, M-A-T-A. Okay. Then I had a follow-up question about my job, and it was a double-barreled question. So why did I choose that job and do I enjoy it? So I divided that into 2 parts. First, I looked at why. And again, it's just 3 reasons. I think from memory, and if I didn't, this is what I would suggest that I do again. Now, and what you can do is say, well, why do I enjoy the job? Well, there are a number of reasons for this. I can't quite recall whether I said that, but that is one which I teach a lot of students. There are a number of reasons for this. The reason that's a good thing to introduce in a speaking test is that the examiner will know that you're not just going to talk about one thing, and hopefully he or she will give you an opportunity to keep speaking. So I had a number of reasons which I spoke about. So I mentioned my experience as an English teacher. Then I went on to say that I met the owner of the website at a presentation a couple of years ago, and that I developed an interest in online learning. Then I transitioned into explaining why I enjoyed it. And again, that kind of golden rule, which I made up for myself, always try to think of 3 points to add. So my points being, it's a new experience. I got to learn new things, which I connected that back to something I'd spoken about before. So the new things I had already mentioned, so I referenced those, much like you might do in your writing. And then I said, most importantly, or above all else, right? So rather than just go first, second, third, this is where I think writing and speaking have a lot in common. So we have to use cohesive devices to score well in the IELTS. You want to start using some of those in your speaking as well. And don't just do the same ones. Don't just say first, second, third. So what I did is I mixed it up. I said, most importantly, that was to introduce my last point, that I get to interact with people from all over the world. And just to introduce more vocabulary, I gave the names of some countries. So very common types of questions that you might get in part one. Obviously the occupation or job. Then another common topic was hometown. Here I'm just going to give you the whole script which I wrote. Now, this is something that if you are going to prepare a script, do it for something simple like this, right? So you might be asked where you're from or where your hometown is. So I thought, how can I make this interesting? So I said that my hometown is in the north of New Zealand's North Island, right? So I was very specific about the location. Not everybody, I said that I'm from Hamilton, but earlier in the test, but people might not know where Hamilton is. So I said, I gave it a reference. Most people know where Auckland is. So I said it's 125 kilometers south of Auckland. And then I just wanted to have a complex sentence, which is New Zealand's largest city, right? So if you are going to script something, then make it a short answer for a question like this. But if you are going to script it, build in some complex sentences, right? And then I tried to think of some interesting facts that I know about my hometown. So I started by saying it's 37 degrees. That little circle means degrees, south of the equator. So I'm trying to introduce a wider range of vocabulary. And I know this for a fact. It is a coincidence because my wife is from Seoul, which is 37 degrees north of the equator, right? So then my final interesting fact was that the antipode, now this might be a new word for some of you, antipode means the exact opposite. So if I were to drill a hole from Hamilton through to the other side of the world, I'd be very tired because that would take a long time. But if I went from Hamilton to the other side of the world, I would end up in Valencia in Spain. So it's very easy for you to find out where the antipode of your hometown is. Just go to Google and type in the name of your hometown and type antipode after that. So I think that's just a nice little interesting fact that you can add in, right? So, and a final bit of information is I just made a comparison, right? So obviously Valencia in Spain, known to be a very hot place. Hamilton, not so hot. So I did script this. And the reason I bothered to make a script for this particular question is because the chances of being asked where you're from or where your hometown is, that's quite high. So that's something that I think you can prepare a little bit, right? So, but if you are going to prepare it, put in some complex sentences and make it interesting. So hopefully that was slightly interesting. So the final set of questions, or the final question I got asked about my hometown are the oldest places. Now, I actually don't know whether this is true. I'm not sure exactly what the oldest places are. So I wanted to model this for you because you're going to get asked questions in the speaking test and you're not going to be sure. So just be honest. I just said, well, I'm not really sure what exactly the oldest place is, right? So, but I said a few places come to mind. So I'm still going to keep talking about it, right? So Victoria Bridge might not be the oldest place, but it's one of the oldest places. So then again, my three details, I mentioned that it's the first bridge to be built in Hamilton. Again, I had a guess. My guess is it was built in the 1880s. Doesn't matter, it's just a guess. And I said, I think it is, or I'm not claiming that it's a fact. I'm just being asked a question in a speaking test and I want to demonstrate my use of English. It's not a test of facts, but one fact I do know is that the bridge is still in use today, right? So again, if you get asked this type of question and you don't know the exact answer, just say so, but keep talking. That's what you're there for. And the test is not designed to discount you from talking, right? The examiner wants to hear you talk, so just answer honestly. So another old place that I know in my hometown is the building known as the bank. And I just connected that back to Victoria Bridge. I said it's near Victoria Bridge. Originally it was a bank, now it's a restaurant. Then I moved on to my final point about where I live. The suburb is called Hamilton East. That's the oldest suburb. And I just made a reference back to that first point about Victoria Bridge. So I tried to tie everything in together. And I thought, oh, here's some nice vocabulary. That the buildings, the homes around here are wooden colonial style architecture. And again, something I can script about where I live. New Zealand is a relatively new country. While those places might not be considered to be old in many countries, they are in New Zealand terms, right? So a few little sentences or bits of information that you can not quite memorize, but just know that you can pull them out at any time. So just to review what we've been through today, I'll go back to the start. And again, when you're asked your name, don't just say my name is, like introduce some vocabulary, given name, middle name, family name. So anything about where you're from, then you can have something prepared for that, because the chances of being asked where you're from is quite high, right? So if you get a chance to talk about your hometown, have some interesting facts. So my interesting facts were comparing where my hometown is in relation to New Zealand's largest city. I talked about its exact location in latitude, which means, north and south. And I also just thought it would be interesting to mention antipode. So where I didn't expect this type of question were the oldest places. So I'm not going to go away and do a whole lot of research about the oldest places, and you don't need to do that as well. As long as you know a few places that are old, just talk about those. So there are definitely some things that you can prepare for, such as name, hometown, things like this. So I think that's really, I'm going to stop the share of this screen right now, and I'm going to talk about the schedule for the rest of the week. So let's go across to the whiteboard. Oops, I might have to try that again. Okay, hopefully you can see the digital whiteboard at the moment. So I just want to tell you about what's going to happen this week coming up. Okay, so on Sunday, we have the replay. The replay on Sunday, this Sunday, will be reading, but it will be academic. All right, so so far I've done one whole series of webinars about one of the practice tests from the grade site. The replay will be another section from that academic reading test. So if you watch live, if you watch the replay live this Sunday, someone will be there from the site that can answer your questions. If you want to watch a live webinar, please do so next Tuesday. So on Tuesday, the webinar will be reading again, but it's going to be for the general training test. So GT means general training, right? So there are a few differences between the academic IELTS test and the general training IELTS test. So when you take the academic test, you're going to have 3 sections, and they're all basically the same type of section. They're going to be 3, longer readings about quite random topics. If you are preparing for the general training reading test, the 3rd section will be very similar to one of those sections from the academic reading test, but the other 2 sections are more related to everyday English. So for the benefit of our subscribers or other people that are preparing for the general training, the GT reading test, we're going to look at one of those sections, practice sections from the grade site, which is for the general training test. The same skills apply for academic and general training. So if you are preparing for the academic test, it's still going to be helpful if you want to watch the public webinar on Tuesday. So this is the public one. And then on Thursday, for grade subscribers, just like today, we're going to be looking at writing task 2. So this is for grade subscribers. Next Thursday, we actually have an essay which has been submitted by one of our subscribers in Vietnam, Mr. Nguyen. So we're going to have a look at his essay and give some feedback about that. So I'll just check to make sure there were no questions. It doesn't look like there are any questions about the speaking test. So today we had a look at part 1 of the speaking test. We're going to work through an entire speaking test, and we'll just be doing it in the same fashion today, where I'm going to pretend I'm taking the test and then provide some analysis like today of the answers, try to give you some more insight and understanding on how to best prepare for the speaking test. So quite a short webinar today. So if you do have any questions, please let me know. But I hope wherever you are that you're safe and well, and I look forward to seeing you live next Tuesday, and perhaps I can interact if you have any questions, if you watch the replay on Sunday. Have a great week and take care.